The snow was falling thick and fast over Chicago O'Hare, turning the tarmac into a white blanket, but inside the first-class cabin of Flight 402, the air was warm and smelled faintly of pine and expensive coffee. Outside the frosted oval windows, orange flashing lights from the de-icing trucks cut through the swirling gray twilight of December 23rd, a chaotic ballet of machinery fighting the winter storm. Inside, however, the world was soft. "I'll Be Home for Christmas" played gently over the PA system, wrapping the early boarders in a fragile cocoon of holiday peace. In seat 1A, Maya Wright adjusted her position, pulling the sleeves of her oversized gray hoodie down over her hands. To the casual observer, she looked out of place, a young woman in worn sneakers and denim, curled up with a book amidst the suits and cashmere of the elite cabin. She ran a thumb over the cracked leather cover of her notebook, a simple object that looked like it belonged in a college lost and found, yet contained the proprietary fuel efficiency algorithms that were about to save this very airline from bankruptcy. "Champagne before departure, miss?" Maya looked up to see Mark, the lead flight attendant. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deepening with the holiday stress, but his smile was professional and tight. "Just herbal tea, please, Mark," Maya said softly. As he placed the steaming mug on her coaster, she slid a folded $20 bill onto his tray, catching his eye. "Get yourself a hot coffee later. And I hope you get back to your family in time for Eve." Mark blinked, surprised by the genuine warmth in her voice, so different from the barked orders he had been fielding all day. "Thank you, miss. That's a very kind." As Mark walked away, a businessman in seat 2C leaned toward his colleague, not bothering to lower his voice. "Standards are really slipping these days. Used to be you had to dress for the front of the plane. Now it looks like a student lounge." Maya didn't flinch. She simply took a sip of her tea, the steam warming her face. Her phone buzzed silently in her lap. A secure message from her legal team lit up the screen. "Merger documents ready for signature in LA. Safe flight, Madam President." She typed a quick "thank you" and locked the screen, letting the secret slide back into the dark. She wasn't here to impress them. She was just trying to get home. The cabin door remained open, letting in a draft of freezing air that made the businessman shiver. Suddenly, the peaceful jazz was shattered by a sharp, high-pitched voice echoing from the jet bridge. "This is absolutely ridiculous. It is freezing out there, and your porters are incompetent. Do you know how much this luggage costs?" The atmosphere in the cabin shifted instantly. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a tense silence. Heavy footsteps stomped onto the carpet. A woman swept into the cabin as if she were walking onto a stage. She was draped in a pristine white faux fur coat that looked like it had never seen a snowflake, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed despite the wind. She scanned the rows with the eyes of a predator looking for weakness, and her gaze landed immediately on the gray hoodie in the window seat. Maya lowered her book, sensing the shadow looming over her. The woman marched up to row 1, the scent of overpowering floral perfume drowning out the smell of pine. She stopped directly in front of Maya, clutching a designer handbag like a weapon, and looked down at her with sheer disgust. You are sitting in the wrong seat." "Excuse me." Maya lowered her book slowly, her voice calm, contrasting sharply with the woman's shrill accusation. She didn't scramble to apologize, nor did she shrink back. She simply held the woman's gaze with a steadiness that seemed to infuriate the intruder even more. "You heard me," the woman snapped, dropping her expensive handbag onto the empty seat across the aisle with a heavy thud. "You are sitting in seat 1A. That is my seat. And frankly, looking at you, it's obvious there has been some sort of mistake." She waved a manicured hand vaguely at Maya's hoodie. "This cabin is for elite members, not for college students trying to sneak an upgrade on a holiday standby ticket." Mark, the flight attendant, rushed over, his face pale. "Miss Thorne, welcome aboard. I'm sure we can sort this out. If I could just see your boarding pass." "You don't need to see my pass, Mark," Lydia Thorne hissed, reading his name tag with a sneer. "You need to use your eyes. Does she look like she paid full fare for this seat?" She leaned in closer to him, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that carried clearly in the silent cabin. "My father is Horace Thorne. He's playing golf with your airline's vice president in Palm Springs next week. Now, do you really want me to call him and mention that you allowed a seating scam to delay his daughter's flight?" Think about it, Mark. You look like you're close to retirement. Do you really want to risk your pension over a clerical error? The color drained from Mark's face completely. The word pension hung in the air like a guillotine blade. He swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he turned to Maya. He wasn't a bad man. He was just a man who had worked 30 years for a retirement that was now being held hostage by a surname. Miss, Mark whispered, his voice cracking with shame. I'm so sorry. To prevent a delay and a disturbance, would you mind? We have a seat available in economy. Row 32. The cabin held its breath. The businessman in 2C looked away, unwilling to intervene. Maya looked at Mark. She saw the fear in his eyes, not fear of her, but fear of a system that allowed people like Lydia to crush people like him. If she fought this now, Mark would be the collateral damage. Maya closed her book. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, towering slightly over Lydia. She gathered her bag and her notebook, her movements deliberate and graceful. Before she stepped into the aisle, she paused, looking Lydia straight in the eye. I hope this seat brings you the comfort you clearly lack inside, Maya said softly. Lydia scoffed, rolling her eyes as she brushed past Maya to claim the window seat. Finally, go back where you belong. Mark looked down at the floor, unable to meet Maya's eyes as she passed him. I'm sorry, he mouthed. It's okay, Mark, she whispered back. Do your job. As Maya walks away, she pulls out her phone and taps the red icon on her company app. Report violation. Freeze assets. The walk to the back of the plane felt longer than the flight itself, with every eye following Maya like spotlights of judgment. She kept her head high, navigating the narrow aisle as passengers whispered behind their hands. Must have been kicked out, someone murmured. Probably tried to sneak in. The further back she walked, the tighter the space became, the air changing from the scent of pine and perfume to the smell of fast food and damp winter coats. Maya finally reached row 32. It was the second to last row, right next to the lavatories. Seat 32B was a middle seat, squeezed between a sleeping teenager and an elderly woman knitting furiously. Maya checked her phone one last time. The screen quietly pulses with a processing bar, the calm before the storm. She slid the phone into her pocket and squeezed into the narrow seat, her knees brushing against the tray table. Rough start to the trip, dear? Maya looked to her right. The elderly woman lowered her knitting needles. She had kind, crinkling eyes and wore a festive sweater with a reindeer on it. You could say that. Maya managed a tired smile. The woman reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small plastic container. She popped the lid, revealing star-shaped cookies. Here, have a gingerbread. Homemade. My grandson's favorite recipe. It fixes most bad moods. Maya hesitated, then took one. The spicy, sweet taste brought a sudden rush of comfort. Thank you. I'm Maya. Martha, the woman beamed. I'm heading to San Diego. My grandson is stationed at the naval base there. He couldn't get leave for Christmas, deployed on one of those big carriers. So, if the Navy won't send him home, this old grandma is bringing Christmas to him. She patted the red yarn in her lap. Fighting arthritis to finish his scarf before we land. Maya felt a lump in her throat. She looked at Martha, a woman traveling alone, likely on a fixed income, enduring a long flight just to bring comfort to a soldier. These were the people her technology was meant to serve. These were the passengers who deserved dignity, not the Lydias of the world who treated people like furniture. Outside the window, the view was obscured by thick steam. The plane had taxied to the remote de-icing pad. Machines like giant mechanical insects were spraying orange fluid over the wings to melt the ice. The cabin was dark, illuminated only by the reading lights and the eerie glow of the de-icing fluid outside. Suddenly, the spraying stopped. The rhythmic hum of the engines, which had been spooling up for takeoff, died down to a whisper. The cabin lights flickered once, then stabilized. The aircraft shuddered and came to a complete, heavy halt. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged repeatedly, echoing in the silence. Martha looked at Maya, concerned. That doesn't feel right. Are we broken down? Maya looked toward the front of the plane, her expression unreadable. No, Martha. We're just being corrected. The intercom crackled to life. The The pilot's voice, usually calm and assured, sounded serious and urgent, causing heads to turn throughout the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been ordered by corporate HQ to hold our position. Security is on the way to the aircraft." The de-icing trucks had vanished, but the silence inside the cabin was heavier than the snow piling up on the wings. The hum of the auxiliary power unit was the only sound, a low drone that seemed to vibrate with the mounting tension. Up in seat 1A, Lydia Thorne was busy typing a furious email on her phone, the screen glowing against her perfectly manicured nails. "Finally," she muttered to the businessman across the aisle, who was trying his best to ignore her. "Daddy's team is here to clear the trash. Honestly, I don't know why they let people like that board in the first place." She checked her reflection in the window, smoothing her faux fur collar, preparing to receive an apology for the inconvenience. The sound of the main cabin door unlatching echoed through the fuselage like a gunshot. A blast of freezing Chicago air swept through the first-class cabin, causing passengers to pull their blankets tighter. But Lydia sat up straighter, putting on her most charming, aggrieved smile. 3 men stepped onto the aircraft. Flanked by 2 stern-faced TSA agents was Mr. Arthur Henderson, the CEO of the airline. He was wearing a heavy wool overcoat over his suit, his face flushed not from the cold, but from sheer panic. Lydia waved her hand dramatically. "Arthur, over here. It's about time. Please have that incompetent steward removed as well. He was completely useless when I was being harassed." Mr. Henderson didn't even blink. He walked past row 1 as if Lydia Thorne were invisible. He didn't slow down. He didn't glance at the empty seat where she had dumped her bag. He marched straight through the first-class curtain, past the bewildered business-class passengers, and into the narrow aisle of economy. The entire plane seemed to turn in their seats, craning their necks to watch the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company squeeze past beverage carts and knees. He walked all the way to the back, past the crying babies and the weary travelers, until he stopped at row 32. The air in the back of the plane felt suffocatingly small compared to the front, but Henderson didn't seem to care. He stopped at the aisle seat, took off his hat, and bowed his head slightly toward the window seat, a gesture of old-world respect that silenced the surrounding whispers. "Ms. Wright." His voice was breathless, trembling slightly. "On behalf of the entire board of directors, I am mortified. We received the alert from your risk management protocol. We had no idea you were treated this way." "Next to Maya," Martha gasped, clutching her knitting needles. Maya looked up from her book, slowly removing her headphones. She didn't look angry. She looked like a judge delivering a verdict. "Mr. Henderson," Maya said calmly, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made the CEO flinch. "I see we have a misunderstanding about what first-class service actually means. It seems your staff believes it is defined by the price of a coat, rather than the price of a ticket. It will be corrected immediately, Madam President." "Immediately," Henderson promised, wiping sweat from his brow despite the chill. "Good," Maya said. She gestured toward the front of the plane. "Then I suggest you start with the root of the problem." Henderson nodded sharply. He turned on his heel and marched back up the aisle, his face hardening into a mask of corporate fury. He stopped at row 1, where Lydia was now standing, her mouth agape, her face draining of color. "Arthur," she stammered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "What are you doing? That girl, she's nobody." "The only misunderstanding, Miss Thorne," Henderson said, his voice cutting through the cabin loud enough for every passenger to hear, "is assuming your father's name grants you immunity from federal law." "My father?" Lydia sputtered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "Do you know who I am?" She looked around the cabin for support, but the faces that had once looked at her with envy now held only pity or amusement. "We know exactly who you are, Miss Thorne," Mr. Henderson replied, his voice devoid of warmth. "And we know exactly what you attempted to do today. You used your family name to intimidate my crew and harass a passenger who holds a controlling stake in our future fleet expansion." He gestured to the 2 TSA agents standing behind him. "You are being deplaned immediately for violation of passenger dignity protocols and federal interference with the flight crew." Lydia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had armored her minutes ago shattered completely. "But my bags, my trip—" "Your luggage will be mailed to you," Henderson cut her off. Officers, please escort Ms. Thorne off the aircraft. Lydia didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply wilted. As the agents guided her into the aisle, she had to walk the entire length of the first-class cabin past the seat she had stolen, past the passengers she had performed for. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft click of seatbelts being unbuckled as people craned their necks to watch. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, disappearing into the cold Chicago night, a young woman in row 3 whispered loud enough to be heard, "Karma flies fast." Back in row 32, Maya watched the notification on her phone screen turn green. Threat resolved. She tapped the screen, deactivating the legal hold on the airline's assets. She had made her point. She didn't need to bankrupt them. She just needed them to listen. "Ms. Wright," Henderson said gently, extending a hand. "Please, let us escort you to your rightful seat. We have cleared the cabin for you." Maya nodded to Martha, who was watching with wide, watery eyes, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. Maya squeezed the older woman's hand briefly before standing up. She followed Henderson back up the long aisle. The walk back felt very different from the walk down. There was no judgment now, only respect. When they reached the galley separating the cabins, Mark, the lead flight attendant, was standing by the jump seat. He was pale, his hands shaking as he adjusted his tie. He couldn't meet Maya's eyes. He knew what was coming. He had failed a VIP. In this industry, that meant termination. Mr. Henderson glared at Mark. "We will discuss your conduct at the review board on Monday, Mark." Mark flinched. "Yes, sir. I understand." Maya stopped. She placed a hand on the bulkhead, blocking Henderson's path. She looked at Mark, seeing the photo of a teenage girl tucked into his ID badge holder, the daughter he was likely paying tuition for, the reason he needed that pension. "Mr. Henderson," Maya said softly. The CEO stopped. Mark made a mistake, but he made it out of fear. He was threatened with his livelihood. She turned to Mark, her expression stern but kind. "Mark, I know you were afraid for your pension. But never let fear make you forget your humanity. Authority isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who protects the quietest." Mark looked up, tears rimming his eyes. I'm so sorry, Mississippi." "Keep your job," Maya told him. "But I want you to be the first to take the new sensitivity training I'm funding." Mark nodded vigorously, relief flooding his face. "Thank you. Thank you." Maya turned to enter the first-class cabin, seeing the empty, spacious leather seat of 1A waiting for her. She paused, her hand hovering over the headrest. She looked back at the curtain separating her from economy. Maya turns back to the economy curtain. "Wait," she says. "I'm not sitting in 1A alone. I have a friend." 20 minutes later, Flight 402 finally roared down the runway, lifting off into the snowy night sky of Chicago. The city lights below sparkled like a sea of diamonds, fading into the distance as the aircraft punched through the cloud layer and leveled off into the smooth, star-filled velvet of the cruising altitude. Inside the cabin, the tension of the ground delay had completely evaporated, replaced by the hushed, attentive service of a crew eager to make amends. In the front row, the red scarf Martha had been knitting was now resting on the spacious leather armrest of Seat 1B. Martha herself looked around with wide, childlike wonder, her fingers tentatively stroking the porcelain teacup that Mark had just placed on her tray table. It was a far cry from the plastic cups and cramped knees of row 32. "Oh my," Martha whispered, taking a cautious sip of the chamomile tea. "I've never been up here, child. The legroom, it's bigger than my porch back home. I'll have quite a story for my grandson when I finally get to the base." Maya smiled, watching the older woman's face light up. She had upgraded Martha instantly, insisting that no grandmother traveling to see a soldier should have to sit by the lavatories on Christmas Eve. "It's not a miracle, Martha," Maya said gently, clinking her own cup against Martha's. "It's just setting things right." Martha sighed contentedly, but then a shadow of worry crossed her face. "I just hope I can figure out the buses in San Diego. The base is quite a trek from the airport, and my hips aren't what they used to be." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She tapped a few keys and slid the screen toward Martha. "You won't be taking a bus, Martha? I've arranged for a car service to meet us at the gate. The driver is a veteran himself. He'll take you straight to the naval base gate, and I've already cleared a visitor pass for you to have dinner with your grandson tonight." Martha's hands flew to her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. "You did that for me? But why? I just gave you a cookie." "You gave me kindness when I had nothing but a hoodie and a bad seat," Maya replied softly. "That's worth more than any ticket." Martha reached out and squeezed Maya's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're an angel, dear. A real Christmas angel." Maya shook her head, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. She looked out the window at the endless horizon. She pulled out her battered notebook again. She flipped past the pages of fuel algorithms and cost-saving strategies to a fresh, blank page. She uncapped her pen and wrote a new header at the top: "The Right Path Scholarship for those who have the talent but not the seat." This was the real victory. Not humiliating Lydia, not proving her power, but using that power to ensure that the next time a young girl in a hoodie walked onto a plane, she wouldn't be judged by her clothes, but by her potential. As the plane flies toward the west, Maya thinks, status isn't about where you sit. It's about who you lift up with you. As Flight 402 disappeared into the winter night, it left behind more than just tracks in the snow. It left a reminder that true nobility isn't found in a title or a ticket class, but in the quiet strength of character. Maya's journey teaches us that when we strip away the coats and the credentials, we are all just travelers seeking a little warmth and respect on our way home. So the next time you encounter a stranger, remember that the greatest gift you can offer isn't an upgrade, but the simple, priceless dignity of a kind word.